Hello guys, Ancient Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. And as for this video we have another GPU comparison, this time focusing on the RX 6950 XT versus the RX 7900 GRE versus the RX 9070 non-XT. And the point of this video is mostly to see if people having those same cards, the 6950 XT or the 7900 GRE, are actually having a nice upgrade going to the 9070 non-XT or not really. And to complement this video even more, I'm also adding the 7900 XT in order for you to see the differences in performance in between the 7900 XT and the 9070 non-XT, and also the RX 6800 non-XT. Again, for people that want to upgrade and want to see the difference in performance in between the 6800 and the 9070, this is the video for you. But well, let's start with pricing. Starting with the American prices, we have the 6950 XT out of stock, sadly, but I mean, it's an older generation card, so it is obvious that it was going to be out of stock, but the last one sold supposedly by MSI, I guess, it was sold at $679. As for the 7900 GRE, it is also out of stock as many other cards in the US somehow, and before it was around $550, which is also the MSRP that I believe is $549. As for the RX 9070 non-XT, it came to stock recently around $800, which is not optimal since the MSRP is $549 as well, but I guess prices are inflated all over USA, being it 9070, 9070 XT, basically every single GPU right now is costing way more than it should in USA. I guess people are afraid of the tariffs, companies are afraid of the tariffs, I don't really know, but things aren't working that great for Americans in these couple of months regarding GPU prices, only that. Well, you guys know how it goes, I'm not living in America anyway. But I can talk about European prices because I live in Portugal. As for European prices, we have the 6950 XT with also no stock whatsoever, but you can find a used card for 550 euros, which is not that bad, I would say, in current market, still not great. As for the 7900 GRE, it is the same as before, no stock whatsoever, but you can find one used for 550 euros, and I believe that in certain European countries you can get a used one for even less than this, quite less in some case scenarios. As for the RX 9070, we do have stock in Mind Factory Germany, selling at 659 euros, so a much better price than what we have in America, meaning that this card is basically running at MSRP price plus 19% VAT from Germany, which is just great. It is, again, like I said in my previous comparison video, it is not, well, it is funny for us Europeans, but it is kind of odd to see for the first time in many years to see American prices being worse than the European ones. You can go now to the stores, European stores, and you get cards near MSRP in most countries. Not all European countries, but in most European countries. While in America the prices are completely inflated when it comes to GPUs, which is kind of a bummer, but yeah. $807 and 659 euros for the same card, RX 9070. And now that I know the prices and the price differences in America and Europe, well, let's go to the benchmarks. But before, let's do some curling like proper position and then some shoulder press in order to go for today's sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket.
Starting with Cinebench R24, we don't really have the results for the 9070, as the software still hasn't been updated for the latest GPU series, including the RTX 50 series, but you can already see the 6950 XT performing virtually on par with the 7900 GRE. Moving to Premiere 2024, we have a mixed benchmark here, and I honestly need to add a new benchmark for encoding, as this one is a mix of CPU and GPU, so it doesn't really show the true difference in terms of performance encoding wise. Still, the 9070 is the fastest card. And the same happens in UL Procyon with image generation, where the 9070 is up to 29% faster than the 7900 XT, that is basically only slightly faster than the 7900 GRE. As for the RX 6000 series cards, they do not feature any kind of AI cores, hence the poor performance that you see here, with the 9070 delivering up to 5.2 times the performance of the 6950 XT. And this means that while the 6950 XT takes almost 13 seconds to generate one image, the 9070 generates the same image in only 2.4 seconds, which is a huge difference. Moving to VR Mark in the orange room, we have a more mixed up benchmark, again CPU and GPU sided, so the results aren't different for almost any GPU. But as we go into the blue room, where things get more GPU heavy, we can see that the fastest GPU out of these all is the 7900 XT, being up to 22% faster than the 9070. Although we shall state that the RX 9000 series have better codec quality, so this also means better image quality for VR, so it's kind of a trade-off, I guess. And the last productivity benchmark is with Blender Open Data, and we can see the 7900 XT being the fastest card once again, in this case 31% faster than the 9070. Jesus Christ, that here is only slightly faster than the 6950 XT. And this happens because the 9070 only has 56 compute units, while both the 6950 XT and 7900 GRE have 80, and the 7900 XT has 84. And even with all the architectural improvements of the 9070, it just isn't enough to match 50% more compute units here. Assetto Corsa is one of those games where the RX 9000 series don't run that well, but even with that in mind, the 9070 was able to almost match the 7900 XT that has 50% more compute units. But as we go into 1440p and eliminate the CPU bottleneck almost entirely, we see the 7900 XT being 7% faster than the 9070, and the 7900 GRE being only slightly faster than the 6950 XT. Something that doesn't really change at 4K. What does change at 4K is that the 9070 now matches the 7900 XT while consuming over 100 watts less. Really impressive. And like Assetto Corsa, it seems that AMD still needs to tweak their new GPUs to work better in Counter-Strike 2, where at 1080p we have decent results, I would say, with the 7900 GRE strangely losing to the 6950 XT by a little, and that keeps on happening even at 1440p, where the 6950 XT is 10% faster even though it has the same amount of compute units and is from an older generation. I guess the amount of infinity cache does make the difference, since the 7900 GRE has second generation cache, but only 64 MB instead of 128. At 4K, the 7900 XT is still the fastest card, with the 9070 now matching the 6950 XT, that is, again, strangely strong in this title. But again, the 7900 XT has 80 MB L3, the 9070 has 64 MB, and the 6950 XT has 128. Maybe that's it. As for Call of Duty, it is one of those games that we know that can take a good advantage of AMD GPU's raw power, and we see again the 6950 XT and 7900 GRE on par with each other, which still happens at 1440p. But this time the 7900 XT outmatches the 9070 by 9% OC versus OC and 18% stock versus stock. The difference does decrease to 8% at 4K stock versus stock and only 5% OC versus OC. And this means that even on this game, people upgrading from the 6950 XT to the 9070 would have a 19% increase in performance, alongside of course much lower power draw. Cyberpunk 2077 it is, and at 1080p we're mostly CPU bottlenecked. But as we move to 1440p things change, with the 9070 now matching the 7900 XT, which, again, with 50% less compute units, and the 7900 GRE now outmatching the 6950 XT by 10%. At 4K the difference is very noticeable though. While both the 9070 and 7900 XT are able to deliver basically 60 FPS at 4K native, the 6950 XT doesn't even reach 40. In this specific case, someone going from the 6800 to the 9070 would have double the performance at around the same power draw, which is just awesome. As for Hogwarts Legacy, it is built using Unreal Engine 4, so it does use a lot of GPU's raw power. Hence why even at 1440p the 7900 XT is still the fastest GPU presented. The 7900 GRE is also slightly faster than the 6950 XT, while also consuming less power, and someone going from a 6800 to the 9070 here would have a 49% performance increase, which is a good deal here considering the power draw is the same, I guess. And the deal gets even better at 4K, with the 9070 being able to deliver almost 70 FPS, while the 6800 barely reaches 40. Now, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is an odd title. At 1080p we have all GPUs delivering around the same FPS besides the 6800, even though we didn't have a CPU bottleneck. And that is seen at 1440p, where we still have around the same FPS for all the stronger GPUs, with the 7900 XT being only 10% faster than the 6950 XT, even though it is from a newer generation and has more compute units. And the same happens at 4K, where at least we have the 9070 being 46% faster than the 6800, which is not all that bad, I guess. Alan Wake 2 on the other hand does benefit from architectural changes, and even at 1080p we see the 7900 GRE being 9% faster than the 6950 XT, which is kind of still low if you ask me, and it stays around the same at 1440p, where the 9070 now matches the 7900 XT. And this shows us two things. First is that RDNA 3 was not a huge improvement gaming-wise, of course, and second is that RDNA 4 is and was, because with only 56 compute units and 260 watts power draw, the 9070 is matching 84 compute units card that consumes 380 watts. Impressive. Black Myth Wukong is a very heavy game that is also very poorly optimized, and it uses Unreal Engine 5. All this together and the 6950 XT is outmatching the 7900 GRE at 1080p, which makes no sense. At 1440p the ratios get maintained, with the 9070 performing exceptionally well here, being 34% faster than the 6950 XT, and at 4K the 7900 XT finally outmatches the 9070, but only by a little, with the same being 24% faster than the 6950 XT. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora is one of those games that have always some kind of ray tracing enabled, and somehow the 6950 XT is still faster than the 7900 GRE at 1080p. The 7900 GRE is just a very odd card. At 1440p the scales do get maintained, I'm even stuttering with these results, with the 9070 being only 14% faster than the 6950 XT and 53% faster than the 6800. And it is only at 4K that the 7900 GRE is able to match the 6950 XT, which is kind of a joke, and none of the cards is able to push more than 60 average FPS. Really odd results here. As for Starfield, it might not be the best game ever, of course, but when it comes to benchmarking stability, it is quite good. At 1080p we have the 7900 GRE and 6950 XT on par with each other, with the 9070 and 7900 XT being also on par. Things that do not change at 1440p, like at all. And even at 4K, where the only cards close to 60 FPS mark are the 7900 XT and 9070, that are also around 76% faster than the 7800. Quite decent. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is a recent game built around Unreal Engine 5, and it got some recent performance updates that honestly didn't do much. Performance-wise, at 1080p, we have basically the same we had in many other titles before, nothing really new. At 1440p we have the 7900 XT outmatching the 9070 by 6%, and the 6950 XT also beating the 7900 GRE by a little. As for 4K, no card is able to reach even close to 60 FPS here, with the 9070 now being 16% faster than the 6950 XT and 51% faster than the 6800. As for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, it uses Crytek's engine, and in here the 9070 is indeed the fastest card at 1080p. Although this game has some issues with the AMD cards and should be delivering way higher FPS numbers, and according to what AMD has told me, they're looking into it. Nonetheless, at 1440p the 9070 is still the alpha dog, being 7% faster than the 7900 XT and 36% faster than the 6950 XT. At 4K the difference goes down to 25%, with the 6950 XT now being on par with the 7900 GRE. Still, none of these cards is able to do 60 FPS. And now we have God of War Ragnarok, another title where surprisingly the little 9070 is outmatching the 7900 XT by 8% at 1080p, and the 6950 XT of course by 36%, which is far from little. At 1440p the 9070 and 7900 XT are now evenly matched, with both being 25% faster than the 7900 GRE, that is, in this title, also faster than the 6950 XT. At 4K the two fastest GPUs are still hitting around 80 average FPS, while even the 6950 XT can deliver around 60, which for ultra settings is quite nice, let me tell you. And by the way, in here the 9070 is 80% faster than the 6800, which is a very nice difference for people considering the upgrade. Silent Hill 2 is another shitty title with shitty optimization sadly, and it seems like the developers can't even implement proper GPU culling, and at 1080p we have all cards performing decently well on the averages, but very poorly in the 1% lows, meaning that the gameplay basically has lots of stutters, with the only card delivering a decent gameplay being the 9070, as the 9000 series seem to work much more smoothly in this title, something that can be seen again at 1440p, where the 9070 is slightly faster than the 7900 XT, but delivers 54% higher 1% lows, leading to a much smoother gameplay. And at 4K things are more of the same, with none of the cards being able to deliver 60 average FPS sadly, and the 6800 sitting at 30. Moving to Space Marine 2, all cards are using 4K textures, so on top of a game engine that loves bandwidth, we need even more VRAM and bandwidth as we're using 4K textures of course, and that's why the 7900 XT reigns here, being at 1080p 10% faster than the 9070. At 1440p not all cards do so well as they did at 1080p, and we now have the 6800 not hitting the 60 FPS mark. And of course the 7900 GRE having a lot of drops in the 1% lows when not overclocked, and I assume this is due to the lack of bandwidth. Something that still happens at 4K, where the 9070 does fairly well for sure, but the 7900 XT delivers higher averages, but most importantly much higher 1% lows, delivering a much smoother gameplay due to its higher bandwidth and 20GB of VRAM. And Hellblade 2 delivers more of the same here at 1080p. And sadly, it is also the same at 1440p, where the 9070 is outmatched by the 7900 XT, and the 7900 GRE and 6950 XT are evenly matched again, so nothing really new. Going to 4K doesn't change much, if anything. The 9070 gets a bit more ground, I would say, and is able to deliver close to 60 average FPS, being now 22% faster than the 6950 XT, and 61% faster than the 6800. Again, nothing new. And we now finally have the averages, and this time we have the stock 6950 XT as the base performance. At 1080p we see the 7900 GRE is matched with the 6950 XT, which is kind of a bummer, I guess, since the card is from a newer architecture, so it is supposed to be better, I guess, with the 7900 XT delivering up to 18% better performance, which is still quite subpar for this card, I would say, and the 9070 delivering up to 17% more performance. At 1440p, all cards get a bit more ground over the 6950's XT stock performance, with the 7900 XT now being up to 24% faster and the 9070 up to 18% faster. Not bad for a card with only 56 compute units, even if it is 2 generations above. Now, I was expecting the 7900 XT to get a bigger difference as we went to 4K since it has way more raw power. What I wasn't expecting was that the difference would grow for the 9070 as well, since it is kind of a lower tier card. The same 9070 is now up to 23% faster than the 6950 XT, and this shows that people with a card like the 6800 are looking at a good upgrade, I would say, and people with a 6950 XT or even the 7900 GRE are looking at a card that is still a bit faster in rasterization but consumes less power. I mean, way less power if compared to the 6950 XT, for example. Interesting results here. And well, in terms of rasterization performance, we can see that the RX 9070 is more or less on par with what AMD stated. AMD stated that at 4K the 9070 was around 24% faster than the 7900 GRE, and that ended up being true. For example, from my own testing, even on rasterization only, it can be up to 23% faster than the 7900 GRE and the 6950 XT. So again, it is in line with what AMD said, which is great. But what about ray tracing? I mean, we have rasterization performance and we see that the 9070 consumes less power than both the 7900 GRE and of course the 6950 XT, and performs better. So again, what about ray tracing? Which is one of the main points of the RDNA 4 cards. And even though the 9070 only has 56 computer units compared to the 80 computer units on both the 7900 GRE and the 6950 XT, how will it fare in terms of ray tracing? Will it be slower or faster? As for the ray tracing benchmarks, since all cards are AMD, the ray tracing benchmarks are in a grey bar with white letters in order for them to be seen more easily, I would say. At 1080p you can easily see that even though both 9070 and 7900 XT deliver the same performance in rasterization, as soon as we enable ray tracing, the 9070 is 23% faster. This is with 50% less compute units. At 1440p it is also 21% faster, showing how much better RDNA 4 is in terms of ray tracing, and if we're looking at people with a 6800, the 9070 delivers more than double its performance, which is crazy. Something that stays the same at 4K, where the 6800 barely delivers 22 FPS, while the 9070 delivers 46. Resident Evil 4, on the other hand, is a way lighter title when it comes to ray tracing, but we can still see that the 7900 XT is 6% faster than the 9070 without ray tracing, but when enabling it, the 9070 is now 2% faster. And the same happens with the 6950 XT, that is faster than the 7900 GRE without ray tracing, but slower with it. And that's not something that changes at 1440p at all, because even though the 7900 XT is now faster than the 9070, kind of brute forcing its way through ray tracing, the difference is just much lower. Like at 1440p ultra-wide, where the 7900 XT is once again faster, but only slightly faster with ray tracing enabled. Still, even the 6800 is able to deliver over 80 FPS here with ray tracing enabled. The game is just very well optimized generally. And now we have The Witcher 3, and at 1080p we see exactly the same as before, but now the 7900 GRE gets to be quite faster than the 6950 XT, in this case by 12% without ray tracing and 16% faster with it. At 1440p things don't change much, to be honest, with all cards delivering fairly good results here, and at 4K, where we are entirely GPU bottlenecked, we have the 9070 finally outmatching the 6900 XT in both case scenarios, which was highly unexpected to me. RDNA 4 cards seem to strangely work very well at 4K, even though they have a lower amount or a lower number of compute units. Interesting. And the last ray tracing benchmark is with Alan Wake 2, because here we're testing path tracing, kind of an improved version of ray tracing. At 1080p we see once more the 7900 XT beating the 9070 by a little in rasterization, but the 9070 just smashes it when enabling path tracing, being now 27% faster even with 50% less compute units. Moving to 1440p makes it decrease to 24%, with the 9070 being the only card able to deliver over 30 FPS with path tracing enabled, and at 4K we have a beautiful slideshow for almost any card, but especially for the 6800 that delivered an awesome PowerPoint experience of 5 FPS. And yeah guys, after seeing the rasterization and the ray tracing benchmarks, two different things, where the 9070 is still the best card compared to these, for example in rasterization usually matching the 7900 XT, generally being a bit slower, of course, but not by that much, and being considerably faster than the 6950 XT and the 7900 GRE while consuming over 100 watts less, for example comparing to the 6950 XT, and also being considerably faster even than the 7900 XT when we're running ray tracing, or at least heavier ray tracing like in Cyberpunk 2077 or Alan Wake 2. What about frame generation? Because frame generation is one of those things that most people use nowadays, and it is actually and certainly a thing that people should look into. The 9070 does have FSR4 in terms of upscaling quality, and FSR4 is much better than FSR3 or 3.1, just not even a match. FSR4 is just very good, which is already a plus for the 9070, but again, what about frame generation? How will it run? Now, frame generation is an entirely different beast, and different cards can and will work differently, especially on the Nvidia side. But well, at 1080p things are all in line with what they should be. At 1440p though, we can see that the 7900 GRE is around 6% faster without frame generation, but with it enabled it is around 11% smoother, while of course delivering much better 1% lows than the 6950 XT somehow. And that could be just a random stutter, but it still happens at 4K, where the 7900 GRE delivers much higher 1% lows with frame generation enabled compared to the 6950 XT. And just to add, you can also see that even though the 7900 XT has 3 FPS more without frame generation, it has only 1 FPS more with it activated, showing that the 9070 is a bit more efficient handling frame generation. As for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, it is a really hard to run and not that much optimized title, like I said before, but at least their AMD FSR frame generation implementation is quite good, as seen. At 1440p we have the 7900 XT getting up to 87% increase in smoothness, with the 9070 getting almost a 90% increase, with the biggest increase here being with the 7900 GRE with a 93% smoothness increase. Although again, as the resolution increases to 4K, we have all the cards delivering 80% increased smoothness or less, so the increased smoothness decreased of course, but with the 7900 GRE and 9070 still delivering the best results. As for Call of Duty Black Ops 6, it is sadly a mess when it comes to AMD frame generation. Some cards work well, others not really. then some others don't really work well at lower resolutions, but work well at resolutions like 4K. Like I said, a mess. At 1080p you see that frame generation breaks the experience with a 9070, and yes, I already notified AMD on this. Then, even though the 7900 GRE and the 6950 XT have the same exact average FPS, somehow the 6950 XT is able to deliver a 58% smoothness increase, while the 7900 GRE only delivers around 33%, and with lower 1% lows. At 1440p things kind of seem to work more consistently, at least, with the 7900 GRE and the 6950 XT having around the same results with and without frame generation, and the 9070 somehow showing a smoothness increase with it activated. And it seems to be only at 4K where it works at least decently. And I say decently because it doesn't really work well per se, as if you look, for example, at the 9070 or even at the 7900 XT, we have lower 1% lows with frame generation than without it. Which makes zero sense, to be honest. But well, these other results are either due to some broken implementation or due to driver issues. Nonetheless, AMD has been notified of the issue. And now in the final thoughts, guys. Well, you saw rasterization, you saw ray tracing, and you saw frame generation. And we all know that FSR4 is much better than FSR3 and FSR 3.1, so if we are picking a card new, and again, not used, if we're picking a card new, and especially if you are in Europe, where the RX 9070 prices are quite okay, there's absolutely no reason to not go to one of these cards. For example, if you can get one close to MSRP, like the one we saw in Mind Factory costing around 650 euros, it is just a blast. I mean, 650 euros, it is faster than the 6950 XT, faster than the 7900 GRE, generally on par with the 7900 XT in most recent titles, and faster in ray tracing as well, and consumes way less power than all of those cards. For example, in some titles, as you saw, the 7900 XT had the same performance as the 9070, and the 9070 consumes 120 watts less, overclocking versus overclocking. So again, it is a win-win. And on top of that, you have FSR4, you have much better AI performance, unless you get a really cheap 6950 XT or a really cheap 7900 GRE. I don't believe you should be going to any other card than the RX 9070, unless of course you can find an RX 9070 XT also at MSRP. Because if you do, then the 9070 XT is better. It consumes more power, but also performs better. So yeah, it's kind of a trade-off in between those two cards. But yeah, the 9070, if priced correctly, is one of the best cards that you can get in terms of performance, efficiency, and of course, if you are in Europe, in terms of price as well. And well people, that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share this video. Leave your comment in the comment section and let me know what you think about these cards. If you have a 6950 XT, 6800 and so on, just let me know, because again, as you saw, the 6800, for example, going from the 6800 to the 9070 is a very good upgrade. The 9070 is sometimes up to twice as fast as the 6800 while consuming around the same power, which is again very good. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video. And again, leave your comment in the comment section because it is really nice. Cheers.